I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional ancestral territory of the First Nation people in our respective locations on which we are learning, working, and gathering today. We pay our respects to the members, past and present, with honor and gratitude as they have stewarded the land throughout the generations. I am confident that we will continue to work together in harmony with the best of intentions. Miigwech. I would like to thank everyone for being here today, and hopefully we're all going to learn a little bit about the way that children learn how to read. I've worked as a teacher, as a literacy support specialist, and now as a coach. I spent a significant part of my career teaching in First Nation schools, supporting students and teachers as they navigated this challenging, exciting process of learning to read. The wonderful thing is that I'm still learning, and I'm sure you are too. As teachers, I think we often feel like we are working in isolation and trying to figure things out on our own. The opportunity for us to get together as colleagues to share knowledge, resources, and ways of teaching is invaluable. In the end, we are all learners, and I hope that you can take something away from the session today. Put it in your bundle or in your back pocket to use in the classroom. Now, many have told me that I have a conversational style of teaching, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and if I can, I will address them as we go. If not, Nikki will collect them, and we will talk about as many as we can at the end of the webinar. So today, we're going to discuss the difference between phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. And once we understand the difference, we can talk about how we can use this knowledge in our instruction to increase student learning. When we think about our ultimate goal as literacy coaches, principals, classroom teachers, for me, it has always been for children to be able to take a text, read it, and understand what they are reading. This seems simple enough, but as you are all well aware, reading is a complex task. So how do children learn to recognize words and read fluently? And how do we teach children to understand the texts they read? When I first started teaching, I was placed in a grade 2 classroom, and I was really excited. I spent the entire summer before the school year researching different strategies and planning for my class. I felt prepared. And then I walked into the classroom, stared directly into 20 sets of little eyes, and all that reading and planning and strategizing went right out the window. Many of you may have had a similar moment. Teaching is ultimately a humbling experience, as it constantly reminds us of all that we still have to learn. So, back to my grade 2 class. Most of the children in my care were really struggling to learn to read, as many of them didn't seem to have the requisite skills. They were struggling with letter knowledge and letter sounds. More importantly, they couldn't connect the sounds to the letters. I graduated university feeling pretty comfortable going into the classroom, but I realized early on that I was just starting to develop the skill set necessary to meet the needs of those children, because those children, like all children, need to be explicitly taught skills to enable them to read. As I taught that first year, I worked on letter knowledge and the connections between letters and sounds, and I observed what the children knew and then built from there. But I often wished I'd had more foundational knowledge about how children learn to read, so that I could have applied it to teaching those very special children those very important skills. I sometimes wish I could go back now and teach them again, but we do not often have second opportunities, and so I took what I had learned and I moved forward. Since then, I've worked with and coached lots of teachers, and the questions that are on the screen now are questions that I frequently get asked, and that's why I've chosen to talk about them today. So let's go back to the beginning. When we think of babies and young children, they learn to speak just by listening to people communicating in their environment, and eventually they begin to make sounds, they start to make words, they connect the words into sentences, and it's almost an organic process. However, we know it's not like that when children learn to read. Reading is not organic, and there are specific skills that need to be explicitly taught. The sequence of skills is developmental, but they all need to be taught explicitly. Literacy skill development is one of the most well understood areas of educational research, and we can Google literacy and seriously find millions of links to connect to. However, schools are still struggling to ensure all children achieve reading proficiency by the end of grade 3. When we talk about learning to read, the end of grade 3 is often identified as a critical point because so much of the focus in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3 is on teaching children how to read. Then, at the end of grade 3, we suddenly expect children to go to grade 4 and be able to read to learn. We assume they have all of the necessary reading skills to be able to read proficiently, but we, as teachers, know that's not always the case. Our goal at the Learning Bar is to decrease the number of students who finish grade 3 who are not proficient readers. We want to increase the number of proficient readers to 100% of all of the children in grade 3. So let's talk about the difference between phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. When I think of phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics, I think through the eyes of a new teacher, when a lot of these terms were new to me. Phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, for example. As a new teacher, I knew what phonics was, as it's a program commonly used in the primary grades and is discussed in new teacher education classrooms. When we talk about phonological awareness, we're really talking about what children can hear. It's the auditory skill sets. It refers to the ability to hear, to identify, and to manipulate the sounds of a spoken language. It is not connected to written language. And the most important thing to know about phonological awareness is that it's based on oral sounds. And for phonological awareness instruction to be effective, it has to be done orally. We're not going to get children to be able to segment words into syllables through worksheets. They need to do it orally for students to learn the skill and be engaged in the process. Now, your classroom is going to be a little bit noisy when you're working on phonological awareness as children engage in the activities, but students must hear the sounds without the print. They need to be listening to the sounds and the syllables and the words they hear. When we think of phonological awareness, it's a big umbrella, so we've broken it down into 2 subsets. Now, it might be the language arts teacher in me, but I love new words. So I have a term on the screen that you may not have encountered before, supraphonemic awareness. Here at the Learning Bar, we distinguish the difference between supraphonemic awareness and phonemic awareness. So what is supraphonemic awareness, you ask? It essentially refers to large segments in our oral language. It's breaking sentences into words, it's breaking words into syllables, and it allows you to have a lot of fun with rhymes and alliteration and chunking sentences into words. It is about breaking up all the bigger parts of oral language without thinking of the individual sounds in the words. Instead, focusing on the words themselves and the syllables within the words. And this is where you can begin to develop phonemic awareness skills with your students through oral practice. One of the errors that I made as a new teacher was to focus first on phonics. For example, sounding out words and associating them with written language. At has 3 sounds with a letter associated with each sound. What I should have done was begin with the larger segments in oral language. My dog is black. How many words are in that sentence? And then move to syllables in words, computer. After doing all this groundwork in oral language and supraphonemic awareness, then I can move on to phonemic awareness, at, and phonics. Working with supraphonemic awareness skills also allows us as teachers to bring in all that rich language and poetry and rhyme. Nursery rhymes, Dr. Seuss, and so many other wonderful authors can help us to build that connection between rhyming words and word families. I think of the cat in the hat, cat, hat, bat, sat. There's a direct connection between this supraphonemic skill and the ability to identify words in word families later as learners begin to read simple words and sentences. And then we move into phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is based on our speech sounds. These are phonemes. They are the individual sounds in language. When you are teaching learners about phonemic awareness, it is good instructional practice to focus on the language that we're using in schools for sounds and phonemes, so that children can become familiar with that language as well. When we think of phonemes, we're really thinking of segmenting words into sounds that make up the word. We think of the word bat, and we say, how many sounds are in bat? We get children to count them, b, a, t. We then ask children to do the inverse, blending them when I say, k, a, t. What word am I going to make when I put all of those sounds together? Then we model how to blend those sounds together, cat. At this point, the connection between phonemic awareness and sounding out words starts to become really clear, because when we're spelling words, we are chunking and segmenting words into sounds. With phonemic awareness, it's really about manipulating the sounds in the words. So we can do this in the classroom when we say, if I take the word will and I change the w to s, what word am I going to make? Sill. It's changing the sounds, and it allows us as teachers to have fun with words and encourage our learners to do the same. So phonemic awareness is focusing mostly on the letter sounds. We also introduce the letter name so that children start to connect the sound to the letter that makes that sound. So, what does that look like in our classrooms? Many of you may already be doing these types of activities, but look, how many words and syllables are in the following sentence? Reading is my favorite hobby. We can ask children to count the words really quickly as they hear them. We're really trying to focus on listening. And then we can get the children to clap out each word. Reading is my favorite hobby. Counting these larger chunks of language is a super phonemic skill. Another more natural way for us to segment is into syllables. Then we can clap out the syllables. And a really great way to practice this type of super phonemic awareness is to focus on children's names or things they see in the classroom and develop the breaking up of the words into syllables that way. It's a great way to focus on things that learners already know. So names like mine, Connie, things in the classroom, bookcase. Another great segmenting strategy that is hands-on and can be really meaningful for learners is using counters. So when children are breaking a sentence into words or words into syllables, they have a counter or a bingo chip and can move it to represent each word or syllable. Then it becomes almost like a concrete separation of the words or syllables, which helps to cement this knowledge for children. So reading is my favorite hobby, words or syllables, Connie, bookcase. You can play all kinds of fun games orally to help take syllables and phonemes apart and put them back together to make words. Like instead of saying sunshine, can you change the order of the syllables and say shine sun? Rainbow, bow rain. Bookcase, case book. Through these types of activities and games, we can teach children how to manipulate words. When we start teaching phonemic awareness, we're really focusing on the speech sounds in the words. For example, how many phonemes are in the word dog? D, a, g. We get children to sound them out, and they can use their fingers to separate the sounds. They can use counters, d, a, g. They can clap, d, a, g. They can jump, d, a, g. They can use Elkonin boxes, or they can just do it orally. But it's all about separating the words into sounds. We can also have fun changing the sounds at the end of the word or at the beginning and teach valuable skills related to manipulating words and sounds. For example, take the word sit. Can we change the beginning of the word, change s to b? What is the new word? Bit. Or the word dot. Can we change the ending sound of the word, change t to g? What is the word now? Dog. The instructional goal of phonemic awareness and phonological awareness is really to enable children to easily and quickly fully segment the phonemes and syllables within different words. We can do this with songs, with rhymes, with tongue twisters. There's lots of fun ways of engaging children in oral activities, and these games and songs and rhymes can easily be built into a simple 5-minute morning routine. Phonemic awareness activities really should be played with young children, and we often assume that if children do not internalize these skills in kindergarten, then we can't reteach them later on, and then some children get left behind. But as we learn more and more about learning gaps, we are discovering that we really need to explicitly teach to those gaps, and it can be helpful for many children to go back to those phonemic awareness skills in order to develop the skills to move forward. So a question that teachers sometimes have is, are phonological awareness and phonics the same thing? And we know now that they're not the same. When we think of phonological awareness, it's really about developing those auditory listening skills that provide the foundation for phonics instruction. As we already discussed, phonemic and phonological awareness instruction should come before and continue in conjunction with phonics instruction. Then, phonics instruction allows students to decode print and symbols to decode and read words. Students are able to look at a word and link a letter with a sound or a combination of letters to a sound. If phonemic awareness is properly in place, then students can already identify sounds. Phonics instruction goes the next step, attaching symbols or letters to those sounds. As a new teacher, I knew right away that it was important that we matched the letter with the sound. But I realize now how important it was for children to be able to match the sound with the letter as well. So phonics is a reciprocal process. Letter sound, sound letter. When we are teaching phonics, we're really emphasizing the letter-sound relationships and also the rules of written language. So for example, how many different spelling structures can you think of right now that make the long A sound? These skills are so much second nature to good readers that we don't always understand that children do not naturally just understand that a long A sound can be made through 4 different letter combinations. We need to teach that exact skill to children so that they know that AY, like way, the EI in sleigh, the AI in tail, and the single A in rake can all make the long A sound. And when children know that, then they can transfer that knowledge to the end use of identifying words. Add that to the ability to identify word families, the amount of words that children can read begins to grow by leaps and bounds. So just by understanding those 4 spelling patterns, they can make. So we start with AY, way, bay, lay, say, ray, EI, sleigh, neigh. I'm sure there's more, I can't think of any. AI, tail, rail, fail, sail, pale, and of course, rake, rake, take, lake, make. So it is critically important to teach letter sound relationships, the rules of written language and spelling. In doing so, we are really intertwining the knowledge of rules and letter combinations, phonological awareness, and phonics into word recognition and reading. We must include lots of opportunities for children to decode, which is read, and encode, which is spell words. Decoding is the sounding out of words, and encoding is the spelling of them. We also need to provide lots of opportunities for children to sound out words and then spell the words, and not to think of just decoding, but also of establishing that link between decoding and spelling. When we consider phonics, matching the sounds of spoken English with individual letters or groups of letters, it's really important that phonics instruction be systematic, which means teaching the easiest developmental concepts at the beginning. For example, as instructors, we need to teach consonant sounds, short vowel sounds, and then work up to the harder concepts found in irregularly spelled words. So what does that look like? Well, let's see. Let's take mop. Let's start with a simple consonant vowel consonant word like mop. Change one letter to make another consonant vowel consonant sound. You can change the first one and change mop to top. So let's make a ladder making at least 3 other words by switching one letter each time. This is a great activity to do with kids. Start with mop, top, and we'll change one more letter, tap, one more letter, sap, one more letter, map, one more letter, mat. Or change a different letter first. Start with mop, map, one more letter, mat, one more letter, sat, one more letter, pat, one more letter, pet, one more letter, set. Okay, so these types of activities provide students with rich opportunities to manipulate sounds, switch sounds and letters, and work on identifying and playing with consonant and vowel sounds. Most researchers recommend 20 to 40 minutes of phonics instruction a day in kindergarten, as well as in grade 1 and grade 2. Historically, we seem to have been under the assumption that if learners didn't receive that instruction in grade 1 or 2, then we didn't need to teach it in the upper grades. But if a 4th grade student doesn't understand what a short A sounds like in a word, we really need to teach them that if they're going to progress and achieve reading success. When I was teaching in primary, I had a student who loved to read. I remember Curious George was his favorite. He would bring these books to me to read, and he would struggle so much. Even though he clearly had the drive, he really wanted to learn to read. But there seemed to be a disconnect between what he wanted to read and what he was able to read. And so we set out together to try to figure out what that was. Through some diagnostic work, I discovered that he did not know his short vowel sounds. Now, as we all know, every word in the English language has a vowel sound in it, and most have one of the 5 common vowels. Imagine how frustrating it would be as a reader to not be able to properly decode words with short vowel sounds. The struggle would be almost insurmountable. So this was a gap that I had identified. And once he was retaught, his ability to read and his joy in reading grew exponentially. These small things that we do as teachers to reach those individual struggling students can have a huge impact on their future success. And we can't give up simply because students get older. Phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics can be taught into the junior grades to support the individual needs of our learners. Often children who have trouble with phonics instruction do so because they have not developed the prerequisite phonological awareness skills gained through exposure to rhymes and songs and being read to. Going back, reteaching, using targeted instruction, games, and activities can help develop that fundamental awareness in students, even into the junior grades. So how do children learn to automatically recognize words and read fluently? Word recognition is the foundation of reading comprehension and reading. Decoding allows children to map the phonemes or the sounds to the letters or the letter sequences, which are graphemes, to read unfamiliar words. I always refer to this, as do many teachers, as sounding out the words. Once children learn to map phonemes to letters and letter sequences, they can begin to decode unfamiliar words. If you think of the activity we just did, where you take 3 letters or 4 letters or 5 letters or 6 letters and give children the opportunity to make words with just those letters without even the other letters in the alphabet, we recognize how powerful that can be. So decoding is best taught through explicit phonics instruction. We start with letter knowledge, and then we move into one-syllable words, consonant, vowel, consonant, like dog. Then we move into one-syllable consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant words, like ship, which has 4 letters, but only 3 sounds. Gradually, we build up to multisyllabic words and to different spelling patterns. When we're teaching decoding skills, we're really teaching children to translate the print that they see into speech that they hear by matching the letters to the sounds that they make. And when we think of decoding, we have to also be aware that oral language contributes so much to word recognition, because the more words that children have in oral language, the better they're going to be able to recognize words when they decode the words in front of them. If I decoded the word computer and didn't know what the word was, I'm not going to be sure if I've sounded out the word correctly. So if children have that oral language, we can strengthen their decoding skills by linking the words that they sound out to their own embedded vocabulary. And we're continuously, as teachers, striving to build vocabulary with young children through read-alouds, discussions, digital media, visual images, and a variety of other media forms. Encouraging children to discuss, share opinions and experiences, and describe images ensures that we're developing rich vocabulary in our learners. Of course, we also know that word recognition taught by memorization is not an efficient word recognition strategy. I mean, think of how many words are in the English language. There's no way we can memorize all of them. So we need to teach skills to be able to recognize unfamiliar words, and that's where learning spelling structures can help learners decode unfamiliar words. Word recognition really requires phonemic awareness, letter knowledge, vocabulary development, and the ability to link symbols to sounds. So what does that look like? Learning about word families, and again, this links back to phonemic awareness. When we think of the at family, cat, hat, bat, the ack family, back, sack, rack, lack, the ill family, will, sill, fill, hill. We can also sound out words starting with words that the children know, or sounds that we've already taught children, and introducing them to words where they can use the known sounds to decode words. Looking for known letter sequences and unfamiliar words. And this is where we can practice segmenting words into syllables. We can teach children that each syllable has a vowel, and then work on blending syllables together, moving from one syllable to multisyllabic words. There are rules, such as when we see a vowel or consonant and a silent E, the vowel says its name, as in name. We can hear the A in name. I think sometimes we as teachers assume that learners will absorb these rules naturally, but for many, if not most, that doesn't happen. As teachers, we need to teach these rules explicitly and not assume that children are going to get it because they see it. we need to draw their attention to these specific rules. Now, let's talk a little bit about orthographic mapping. What does that actually mean? It's the process of storing words into long-term memory. It's now considered the most accurate theory of how children form sight word representations. It's seeing a word and mapping the sounds in that word to the word often enough that it becomes a known word. As soon as the child sees the word, they recognize it. Think of when a child sees the word dog. After several attempts of sounding out or reading the word, it becomes mapped into their long-term memory and becomes a word that is automatically recognized when seen in print. Once the child knows the letters, they don't have to think about them. Once they see the letter L, they don't have to think about what that letter is. They know right away that it's the letter L. And it's the same way with the words. They don't have to think about the word. Once it becomes mapped, it's automatic. Students know these words much the same as when I put up a word on the screen. You don't have to think about the word. You know what it is automatically, and you don't have to think about reading the word. This automaticity is a critical part of becoming a fluent reader. So how does orthographic mapping lead to word recognition? First, it requires multiple instances of word reading. Second, it requires attention to individual letters and letter sound correspondence. And finally, it's supported by an understanding of word meaning.
Hey, Connie.
Yes.
I have a question relating to what you just said, and it might be a good idea to actually address it now.
Sure.
So are there not some very few words that we should support students to memorize, such as phonemically irregular words? I'm thinking about said, the, and a few others.
Like said and the?
Yeah.
I mean, there are different philosophies about the whole sight word, the theories around sight words, and there are some that do not follow any regular pattern, and it may be in your best interest as a teacher and for your learners to teach those words specifically, the ones that don't follow any standard spelling pattern. Absolutely. The English language is a funny thing, and it often doesn't follow the rules. So there are always going to be some words that are not going to fall into a phonics pattern or a word family, and it's a good practice as a teacher to recognize those words and to teach them separately. Yes, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Connie.
Okay. So again, oral language is important for word recognition. If children know a large number of words, they connect those words to the words that they see on the page. And when we think about orthographic mapping, we're working from pronunciation to spelling and not the other way around. Once you know a spoken word using phonological awareness, and then you meet it in printed form, it becomes secured in the same way as a spelled word that you recognize. So if you link the oral word in your long-term memory, it's then associated with the print that you see. So what does that look like? Here's a fun game that you can play with students. How many words can you make using the letters in the word teach? How many do you think? 5, 10, 15? Well, I have 17 here. There should be 18. I forgot 8. So these sorts of intentional word games are a fun way to teach phonological awareness or phonemic awareness. When we look at these words, look at all the teaching that's available there with the different sounds of CH, like in chat or in teach, and then in words like ache, for example. And what happens to hat when we add an E to the end of it? These types of rich activities that teach multiple skills are critical. And again, I can't say this enough, can be built into a simple 5-minute morning routine. It does not have to take your whole literacy block. It can be built into small chunks throughout. So we've discussed foundational phonological awareness and word recognition. Now let's look at how we enable children to apply their word reading skills to oral reading. We know that many students who are low in fluency usually have trouble understanding what they're reading as well. So what is fluent reading? There are a lot of definitions, different definitions of fluent reading in the research. This is the one that I really like. Fluent reading should sound like speech and convey meaning. When we think of reading fluency, we're really looking at speed, intonation, accuracy, and prosody. Prosody is reading with expression. Fluency is an important component of skilled reading. If a text is read very slowly, children are focusing more on the words that they're reading than on what they're reading or the messages that are in the text. And likewise, if they focus too much on the speed at which they're reading, they're not focusing on what they're reading or the meaning of the text, they're just getting through to the last sentence. What we really want is for it to sound like speech. So we believe in teaching fluency through modeling and assisting, and then giving lots and lots and lots of practice. So we model fluent reading with read alouds, of course, shared reading and small group instruction, and guided reading. This is so important since we can't expect children to read fluently themselves if they haven't heard other people reading fluently as well. And then we need to provide assistance. So that might be with word recognition, it might be with intonation, but we assist children while reading and provide lots and lots and lots of opportunities to practice. While we're providing that practice, we're also providing lots and lots and lots of feedback as well. And the research is very clear. Silent reading and round robin reading do not support developing reading fluency. So children need to read aloud, and they need to have somebody give them feedback as well in order to become fluent. So what does that look like? It looks like reading simple sentences with appropriate speed and intonation. Poetry is a great way to foster fluency because poems are short texts and encourage reading with lots of expression. Reading sight words and lists of words, this supports the decoding of different words. As well, repeated reading of the same text can build fluency. And we consistently model fluent reading through daily targeted read alouds that can support word recognition, vocabulary development, and a host of other skills. Now, also very important, something very close to my heart, providing students with their choice of text is critical because children need to want to read a book and they need to feel passionate about it in order to learn just like adults. As a result, it's critical that we offer choice in classroom libraries. We need to provide a variety of genres and reading levels to meet the needs of all of our students, and we need to provide feedback to students during practice. So how do we teach children to comprehend text they read? Well, we've talked a lot about decoding today and the importance of comprehension and how important it is that children be strong in both domains to fully understand what they are reading. What does that look like? We need to teach reading comprehension by providing varied genres and texts. We need to teach children that if they're reading a narrative, they're going to use a different skill set than if they're reading a persuasive essay, for example. So we use different skills and we have to teach those skills explicitly. We need to teach children to identify the story elements, the plot, the theme, the setting, etc. We want to remember that in the early years, first and foremost, we want to foster a love of reading. Reading strategies can and must be taught, but not to the detriment of the value of the story itself. If we can encourage a genuine love of reading in our students, then the sky's the limit. You know what they say, today a reader, tomorrow a leader. We need to teach children to scan for information in essays and expository texts and to visualize. Poetry is great for visualization as well, because we want children to create images. We want children to be able to stop when they're reading a text and think about what they've read and monitor their own learning. As well, we want to teach children to generate questions and learn to make connections and infer deeper messages through their own unique understanding of a given text. We need to model summarizing. We need to model think alouds to help children to develop these important comprehension strategies. I'm going to conclude today with the importance of connecting reading with writing, because when children can write about a text that they've read, it encourages them to really dig deep into what they've read to create meaning from it. I want to thank everyone today for joining me today. As I said at the beginning, I hope that you all can take something away from our time together and it becomes part of your educational outlook or framework.